Hello, and welcome to today's webinar on flexible consumption models brought to you by Insight and NetApp. I am Christy Fatry, Marketing Manager at Insight, and will be your moderator today. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be an interactive between you and the presenters. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your question. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. This help guide covers common technical issues. I would now like to turn this presentation to our presenters, Kent Christensen and Chris Collins. Kent, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Christy, and thanks everybody for taking a little bit of time out to look at the subject of storage as a service with Keystone. We're honored to have Chris Collins, Dr. Chris Collins from NetApp, and he is, when you talk to anybody at NetApp, kind of the center of all Keystone. How does the infrastructure get built, et cetera. So, Chris, great working with you.
Yep, thanks, Ken.
You'll find this, the intention of this is to be totally educational. What I want to start out with is a little bit of what we're seeing in the market, why everything as a service is becoming incredibly important. And you'll find that Chris and I didn't have a highly scripted agenda here. There are some slides we follow through because we're working on this all day, every day. And so really a lot of what we want to do is answer your questions. First of all, what's as a service? Everybody's doing it. Why do clients want it? What does it look like? And to a certain extent, the details of Keystone and some examples. So if that's fair, there's a question window that you can ask any question you want. Everything is fair. Because as Chris told me 10 minutes ago, even we get stumped once in a while. So that's our challenge. I don't know if Christy has a prize for stumping us, but so I'm going to start with, what we're seeing in the market. NetApp came out with this model right at the beginning of 2020, and right at the beginning of 2020, nobody knew what was happening or going to happen. And Gartner came out and said, hey, this concept of as a service was really less than 1% of the market up to that point, and they predicted it'd be, probably 15%. Well, then as 2020 unfolded, they're like, oh, well, it's a lot more urgent because, some people don't want to use their capital. And then as we kind of got through it and everybody realized that, for many organizations, this is going to be okay and an accelerant and business has been good, Gartner upped it further. And in March of this year, and I've heard they've upped it again, they said, 40% of all infrastructure and 70% of all enterprise storage would be consumed this way in the next 3 years. That's huge. I mean, they never predicted cloud to grow. They didn't change their predictions on anything that I can think of from 1 to 15 to 40 to 70 that quickly. And the answer is, it's very rare when Gartner's incredibly clear as to why. Because nobody likes CapEx. They don't like the life cycle of the hardware. They don't like the termination. They don't like the end of support. They don't like service contracts. They don't like the inflexibility of I bought something and now I'm kind of stuck with it and I have other plans. It's inflexible. And so that's why we're seeing, a huge uptake in the market. And, at the end of the day, while Keystone was one of the first to get in this market, you probably noticed, even if you watch commercials on TV, everybody wants to get in. So, one of the things we've seen at Insight is, we in NetApp have so many clients, and many of them look at this as a binary option, right? I either run a data center, buy CapEx, pay staff, pay heating and cooling, maintain everything, or I go to the public cloud. And for some of them, they're like, isn't the public cloud awesome? It solves all of these things for me, and I just pay for what I use, And what we've done with the as a service model, we've said, well, hybrid is real. It was always real, but it was more complicated to visualize. Now, if somebody has a commercial, we could bring the cloud to you. That's really a great way to think about it. You now can build it in your data center. You can go to public cloud, or we can bring whatever aspects of cloud you need to you, whether it's in your data center or somewhere else. And it just opens up the opportunity and it opened up, how people plan. So, a little bit more on what is it, and I'll try to address some of the questions. A lot of people are like, is this a lease? Is it fit in the cloud? And so we'll start off with this, that most of the time when organizations, even to this day, buy infrastructure, they use CapEx, which means you architect and plan. The analogy I use is you're going to build a house, and you plan everything at this point in time. And you architect and you plan, and then at some point you have to make a large capital outlay. Now, the OpEx model, i.e. a mortgage, doesn't change that. Matter of fact, it's become incredibly unpopular with public companies, et cetera, to just finance it because of FASB. But regardless of whether you pay CapEx or you lease it, you own it. And you own that house or you own that infrastructure. You have to take care of it. You have to maintain it. If it goes into support, that's on you. If you want to grow it, if you want to shrink it, not so easy. So on the far right, the concept of cloud consumption, that's maybe why a lot of people think it's great. I don't pay up front. You certainly can't start Uber or Netflix by buying a bunch of NetApp infrastructure and building a data center. You start small and pay for what you use and grow it very fast, et cetera. You have flexibility to grow up and down. The challenge that some organizations see is once they get big and know what they need, it becomes potentially incredibly expensive, right? So as a service is kind of in between, where you say, what do I need to start with? I can grow, I can adjust, I can have short terms, things like that, and it's not a lease. So that's kind of what it is. So briefly, why are customers doing this? You can imagine in the beginning of the pandemic, some organizations, and still some today, like oil and gas, you hear companies that say we're preserving capital. Some of them, like travel industry, airlines, hotels, et cetera, last year, they really had to. And so that might have been why they considered this option versus CapEx. The actual two largest reasons for doing this are there's a bridge to a cloud strategy, and that bridge can go to the cloud or from the cloud. And so we'll talk about a client that is coming from the cloud and a client that's going to the cloud. Either way, as you're trying to figure out what's going to go in the cloud, what's not going to go in the cloud over X amount of time, this is actually a very flexible bridge that says just put it here. You can shift it to the cloud. You can shift it back from the cloud. And so it provides a lower risk solution to your cloud strategy. And the final option is organizations who are thinking about, oh my gosh, I've got this big event at the end of 2022. I got to figure out what to do. And at some point they say, oh my gosh, I can start here, I can grow it, I can shrink it. This actually takes a lot of risk out of my decision. So at the end of the day, why are customers doing as a service? Every one of these options takes risk out of a complicated discussion. So with that, as I start transitioning over to what Keystone is, as I mentioned, everybody has got a solution. Now, what you'll see from NetApp, and Chris will go into it in some more detail, is NetApp from the very beginning said, I have a rate card. It looks just like a rate card in the cloud. So you're used to that. Like, how much is it for this type of service? How much is it per terabyte, right? Now, other organizations say, hey, I've got an as a service. What do you need? They configure a bunch of hardware, and then they come up with a price. And it's not transparent like that. And for some organizations, you have to be aware of that. Some organizations will say, well, wait a minute. If my service agreement of how much I'm going to consume lists the hardware, my finance team might say that's a lease. That's up to your finance team. But the configuration-based pricing doesn't alleviate all the challenges of CapEx. It just gives you an OpEx model that may or may not work. And one of the things we've seen is some of the companies that a year ago were into this configuration-based pricing are transitioning into the service-based pricing. So, what is Keystone? First of all, I guess, Chris, I don't know if you want to talk about it, but one of the ways I described it to a client is the NetApp Data Fabric is awesome. You can put it wherever you want it and consume it any way you want. But Keystone, Chris, if you want to just touch on, really can go anywhere, wherever you want it.
Yeah, that's right, Kent. And so what the idea is that, you actually end up with a service delivery catalog. And that service delivery catalog is based upon performance service tiers with a price per gig per each one of those performance tiers. And based upon where you want that service, you can actually have it both in the public cloud, in the private cloud, or a combination of either one with the various public cloud offerings and the private cloud offerings, and be able to pay a monthly price that is just part of your OpEx environment as you go along. And that gives you that ability to place that workload, move the workload, have the workload in both locations. Right? The one that we see quite a bit is customers who want to perform their individual workloads or applications in their own data center, but have a DR strategy to go up to the public cloud. Right? They might want to move their DR strategy into AWS and be able to fail over there if they need to, and do that entire thing by just getting a monthly bill. And then you're only paying for what you're using. The other key thing that's really, really key as you do this, what Kent was saying about the CapEx purchases, when you do your planning and you do your sizing and you do your capital purchases, you're actually taking that risk on for yourself. And you're saying, well, I think I can do this and I think I can do that, and you do the educated guess, but it is in fact just that, an educated guess a lot of times. Well, with Keystone, you don't actually have to worry about, do I need enough hardware to last me 5 years? I start off small because that's what I have now, and if the bosses throw a new application at me, or if the business unit throws something else that I need, I can expand that based upon what's needed at the time, and there's no penalty. We know what the service catalog is up front, we know what our contracted cost is, and bam, we just get that right to use. And that's exactly how Keystone works.
Awesome. So somebody asked a question. This is, what's the primary use case for the tool they got on late? The use case is I need storage. I need enterprise type of storage. Either I buy it or I go to the cloud, or in this case, you can consume it as a service, even if it's in your data center or OpEx. I think it's safe to say, Chris, on the last chart where you can have it in your data center, Equinix in the public cloud. Nobody else has a solution like that. And if they did, they'd have to bring in multiple platforms. This actually chart, I'll say it because it's a little bit political. This is showing, a subset, abbreviated version of what the Keystone solutions are, Extreme Premium Standard. And then if you go out in public cloud, Microsoft Azure calls it Azure NetApp Files. And you'll see Ultra Premium Standard, kind of the same thing. If you go out to Google, it's called Cloud Volumes, Standard Premium Extreme, kind of the same thing. If you go out to AWS, it's called FSH, and it's, again, probably the same hardware. One of them you buy from Microsoft or AWS, and the other one you buy from Insight, and it's Keystone, and it goes in your data center. What I think is awesome, as we start showing you the rate card, you'll see that the rate for the on-prem version of Keystone is probably less than $80 a terabyte, more like 60-something for premium. And you can Google it right now if anybody's interested. Azure NetApp Files, look at the rate for premium, $300. FSX, $286. Why is it 3 times more expensive to buy the same product through a different company, but kind of the same stuff in the cloud versus on-prem? That's the industry. Neither one, NetApp didn't price either one wrong. The going rate for that quality of service in a public cloud provider is closer to $300. In a private as a service, it's less than $100. So that's just reality. With that, Chris, I think it makes sense for you to kind of go through the different service levels that are available in the Keystone program.
Sure. Thanks, Kent. So if you take a look at it, this is really the Keystone Service Delivery Catalog, okay? And we have it broken up into 3 different categories. We have our file and block category. And for those of you who are interested and know about NetApp, that's built on our NetApp ONTAP systems. We actually have Object, and Object is built on our storage grid system. And then we have a special category that is just block only, and that is built on our E-Series program. So you have different service levels that you can actually subscribe to. We have Extreme, and that's going to be up to 12,000 IOPS per terabyte, right? And that's under 1 millisecond of access time. And you can actually subscribe to Extreme for as little as 15 terabytes, right? It's a very, very small commitment if that's something that you need. We actually have Premium, which will give you up to 4,000 IOPS per terabyte, and that can be as little as 2 milliseconds. We have Standard, right? This is going to be your standard file shares and stuff like that, up to 512 IOPS per terabyte. And that can be, that has a 17 millisecond access time. But when you're talking about like OneDrive type of access or regular CIF shares, that's actually pretty common for that. And of course, then we have our value service level, which is really designed to be your backup location or your archive location. Our object is Storage Grid, and that's going to be your S3 protocol. And that's built on Storage Grid, so it provides the durability that Storage Grid offers. And then we have Block, which is going to be what we refer to. I also like to refer to Block as cheap and deep, right? It's for very, very simple workloads, for video streaming, those kind of things would be what you would use Block for. And the key is that, for as little as 15 terabytes, you can actually activate any one of these particular service levels. Now, the key to the whole thing, for those of you who are familiar with NetApp's technology, you can actually tier this data into the public cloud. Now, why do you say that? What are you really talking about? Because we can actually provide NFS, CIFS, iSCSI, Fiber Channel, S3, or all of the above. And the key with Keystone, unlike in traditional CapEx purchasers where you have to buy separate cards, you have to do all that, with Keystone, you can have any of the protocols you want, or you can have all of them if you want. And that's all included in the service, right? You don't actually have to pay any extra if you want NFS and CIFS, right? You want both, fine. You want all three, fine. You want all five, fine. Right? You just got to let us know which one you like, and we'll provide that for you, as part of your right to use service. With Object, it's going to be your traditional S3 durable type storage. And for Block only, that is actually going to be your Fiber Channel and your iSCSI. So the key is that you have a menu. You will have a rate card of what these different services are. And as you need these services, you just order them. But the key is that you're also going to be able to burst, right? So if you order, say, 100 terabytes of Premium, and for some reason you need more than 100 terabytes for a short period of time, there is absolutely no problem with you actually consuming more than what you subscribe to. And, oh, by the way, it's actually billed at the same rate that you would if for your standard service. In other words, there's no bonus charges involved, right? Now, when you get up over 20% burst capacity, we do actually charge a 1.5 rate factor on the burst capacity. But for that first 20%, that is the same rate that you're paying anywhere else. And so you can use that storage as you see fit, and then you give it back when you're done, and off you go, right? It's very, very simple, very flexible. The idea is to be able to provide as much flexibility for the least amount of cost as possible. Ken?
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. I think two things. One, you pointed out that you don't charge a premium for that first 20%. Anybody who's going to go over at Insight, we're helping you manage your subscription. If you need over 20% for a long term of time, we'll adjust it so that you don't have to pay a premium. But I think as you went through and described all these services, I think in 100 clients or whatever we've worked with, maybe one has looked at the Block, because the strength of the platform is the file and Block, which is NetApp's ONTAP that says I can do file, I can do Block, I can do NFS, CIFS, iSCSI, Fiber Channel, all within a single platform in Interior to Cloud. That is 98% of what people are consuming, and it's very powerful. You can have any protocol, any level of service, wherever you want it. It's an awesome story. When I hear somebody who says, hey, I'm thinking about storage as a service, I would say in 30 seconds, all you should do is look at this one thing. And there's a better version on NetApp's website. Here's the rate card we just showed you. Here's the list rates, right? So Again, we talked about cloud versions of premium being, $79. That's the highest price for a 1 year paid by the month contract for the minimum amount of, as you saw, it could be as low as 25 terabytes. And so, that's kind of the highest price you would ever pay for the smallest, shortest duration. We talked about cloud being, close to $300 for that same premium level of service. And, whatever competitors to NetApp dare put it on their website, some of them do, you'll see that this is an incredibly competitive offering, both in the breadth of the offering. They don't just do block flash, but in the pricing of the offering. So, Chris, do you want to go a little bit about, how we work with your team? I know that, ultimately what we do is work with the client to figure out the subscription they need, i.e., how many terabytes of what type of service do you need here, there, and the other place. But that's when we kind of connect to you to build the system.
Right. So what we would normally do is your account teams or the account teams that are out there dealing directly with individual users or business owners are going to primarily focus on what that subscription needs to look like. And that is the service catalog with the commitments that are requested and things of that nature, right? We have 6 questions that we need to answer. The first one is, what service level do you need? The second one is, how much of that service level? The third one, what do you need to connect to it, right? Do we need fiber channel, Ethernet? The fourth one is, how long do you need the subscription to go? The fifth one is, how many locations are we going to be located? And that's a comedy routine in and of itself, because we sometimes forget to ask that question. And of course, the last one is, who's going to operate the system, right? And why that's important is because Insight offers an absolute fabulous managed service to help manage your entire infrastructure, right? They can do soup to nuts management and a total turnkey solution. But the other choice is, and we do have a lot of customers that go, you know what? I'm a NetApp expert. I don't need anybody to manage this and operate this for me. I'm going to do that myself. Well, the answer is, great. Let's not change what you're doing today. Let's just change how you're consuming it. So once those 6 questions are answered, then that becomes what we refer to as the right to use. So we actually have a very specialized tool here at NetApp that we will then run that data through, and it will actually help us build a hardware configuration that will actually support the service levels that you're asking. And then some, right? We always kind of over-engineer a little bit because, I'm kind of a pessimistic kind of guy. I do that. So we will actually then build the hardware configuration, and we will go over that with the Insight account reps, the NetApp account reps, as well as the end customer, right? And I always love actually showing the end customer the retail price of the hardware that they're going to get, knowing that they're not going to be paying for any of it, right? So I'm sorry, this is $5 million worth of gear, and oh, by the way, you're just paying for your subscription. Let's go. And so the reason why we do that, though, is because we need to make sure that we have enough space, power, HVAC, that we have the correct network connectivity, right? Just because the customer wants 10 gig Ethernet, well, do they need LC to LC connections? Do they need regular Ethernet copper cables? What is it that they need? Let's make sure we go over it, that it will go into the environment just fine. And once we do that, we will actually place the order, and an entire project management team will then jump into action to make sure that this gets installed. Because here's the key. Everything is included, right? A lot of people go, do I need to pay extra to have the hardware installed? No, you don't. It's included in your subscription. Do I need to pay extra for software licenses? No, you don't. It gets included in your subscription, right? So basically, it's included, gets used a lot in Keystone because we include all the services that you need to be able to provide what it is you're asking for. And so that's what will get done, and it'll get handed over to the actual operations team on the customer site, as well as our managed services team at the Insight NOC, and off it will go. And that's how things will kind of go once you decide that you want to engage in a Keystone environment.
This is a really awesome part about Keystone. I'm yet to see the customer or the engineering team designing storage that hasn't been thrilled about that interaction with Chris and his team. Matter of fact, Chris, I'm pulling you into another one that we were talking about earlier. That's huge. They're pulling stuff out of the cloud, and we want Chris and the team helping their experts in storage understand exactly what they're going to be getting, and if they're going to run it, how they'll run it, and what it'll look like. So it is really an awesome part of the Keystone program is working with that team. So we're going to quickly go through a couple of examples. This is one that we've worked on together, and actually, it was one of the very early clients before anybody really understood what Keystone was. It started, over a year ago, probably a year and a half ago, where they essentially said, look, because we're going to the cloud, we're not going to need to buy NetApp anymore. And we have dozens and dozens of clients that are saying, hey, because I'm going to the cloud, I'm not going to buy anything anymore. And we're like, okay, well, what are you going to do? And the natural motion would be in the old way of things saying, oh my gosh, what if I gave you a discount until you get there? Or what if I extended your support? And instead, we said, well, would Keystone work? And they were, at the time, this client was just buying file storage from NetApp. And they said, yeah, this would work great. Now what am I going to do with my block? I have a lot of that. And that provider doesn't have a program like this. And initially they said they weren't going to put it on NetApp, but now they've changed their mind. What about my file, et cetera? So, Chris, what have we done? 4 or 5 now with this client? They just keep adding more stuff.
Yeah, I think it's 5. Yeah.
Yeah, and the interesting part.
It's actually 6.
So the interesting part was initially the CFO said nothing over 1 year. And then they said, well, what happens if I just want to go month to month? And we said, no problem, And now they're starting to do 4 and 5 year contracts going, yeah, this stuff isn't going to get to the cloud anytime soon. But they continue to use this platform unless they have a really long-term need. So another part that's really getting exciting, now that client was asking about compute and we're working with them on it. We have multiple clients asking for that. But one of the things that's kind of adjacent to this is Cisco Plus, which is now a plus sign. But Cisco announced Cisco Plus this year, this spring, late spring. And really it was kind of intended to look a little bit like Keystone. As a service, monthly, you pay per server or per unit of memory or whatever. And again, like Keystone, they own the asset. They started off with their compute nodes. They now have added their networking components, et cetera. And they, kind of like Keystone, I really want the partner to go and build this. I want to build it into things. And so if you really just take Cisco Plus and Keystone, you have FlexPod as a service. And everybody's like, wow, that's really unique. I can get my entire FlexPod for a monthly per unit cost, et cetera. So we have a client, and one of the things we did was we had done this before, but then we started saying that, and there's a couple of questions, we're going to get to those in just a second. But one of the things we had done is we said, for a FlexPod, if I want to run certain workloads, VMs, VDI, SQL Server, we knew what to build, and we built CapEx examples of what the best practice architecture was. Now we did it as a service, and for, this is what we think based on, 1 million or so examples of VMware, VSI, VDI, SQL. Your workloads might be bigger or smaller, and we built configurations. And so this becomes very powerful. I can run a VM at 7, 8, or 9 cents an hour, and somebody's like, "Whoa, the cloud's over 20 cents an hour." And this is really, and so we had a client that was a service provider. They had 3,200 applications. It was a cross section of VDI, SQL. VDI was GPUs, VMware, et cetera. And ultimately, we used that same model to say, okay, we measured all of their workloads, figured out what it would be as a service, and we figured out that it would be about 0.79 cents an hour. What was awesome is they also had Microsoft in there, giving them incentives to go to public cloud. And what they came to the conclusion was, and we, pulled the data from Project Athena, and there's a bunch of numbers on here, but, we predicted it'd be $512,000 a month to go to public cloud. And it ended up being closer to $560,000 a month to go to public cloud. And we put together a configuration. You don't have to read all this, but the bottom line is, down at the bottom, monthly, $180,000 a month, hosted, et cetera. So the summary was, well, we're not going to public cloud. At a third of the price, this makes much more sense. Can you put it in a data center so it's like cloud, and can you manage it for us? And so that's really an example there of how we work with the clients. Now, Chris, we were talking about one today where you have to go and visit them. Chris is out in Virginia, so that gives you some hint, but it's a large client that has over 10,000 workloads in public cloud. And we know that they're paying tens of millions of dollars per year for that. And we put together a very detailed example of what they could do. And for them at that scale, it was about 6 cents per hour. And that's a project that Chris is going to be in meetings in the next 2 weeks because they need to get this up as soon as possible. And so it's a very powerful solution. And I think you have some view into that client, right, Chris?
I do, actually. Yeah, it's one of those large companies just north of the Beltway. Going to enjoy going up there. And so we're going to be able to go up there and sit down with them. We'll be able to take a look at the workloads that they have. The other good part about doing this is we have the ability to do what we call a Keystone Advisory Workshop, right? And a Keystone Advisory Workshop will give us the ability to go in and measure what the customer is using, right? We can look at their virtual machine infrastructure. We can look at their storage infrastructure, their network infrastructure, and we can do this. And it will help us identify what applications and volumes need to be moved or grouped, and it will help us put together what their service catalog needs to look like. Now, we do provide this service as a free of charge service for any customer that wants to do it. So basically we ask customers, hey, do you know what you need? And if they go no, and our answer will be, well, would you mind if we came and measured for you, right? And so you measure once, you migrate. You measure twice and you migrate once. So that's really kind of the idea to be able to do that.
Awesome. We got some awesome questions. So, we talked a little bit, Chris mentioned that you can manage it yourself. And what that means is Insight would be providing the essential service, it's the same essential service if you were buying cloud from us, if you're buying Cisco Plus from us, Keystone, that we're going to do all the billing. We're going to do the client success, which says, hey, you're coming up to a number. Should we get you more capacity? Are you meeting? Is it meeting your needs? You can call us for any question for the service, anything it touches, and we help optimize it. The concept of full managed means a lot to different people. And so what we do is we have a standard version of advanced services. And if you want the advanced, which is more proactive, we're doing a bunch of stuff for you. Ultimately, this was about 20% at the beginning of the year. We've gotten so much scale that literally for 10%. So if the rate for the service was $70, for $77, we'll add the advanced services, a little bit more if you want the premier services, et cetera. And then, kind of what we were talking about earlier is that Keystone, that's a lot of times the starting point. We gave examples of they wanted to include Cisco or some other compute. They want to include network. They want to tier to the cloud. They want to put it in Equinix data center. Ultimately, Insight is doing all of that for you. Every logo on here has a relationship with Insight to provide as a service. I think hopefully you understand how much we think the Cisco or the Keystone version is an awesome solution. So Chris, we got some great questions, and one of them is perfect for you. They require encryption at rest with the keys on the external key manager. So do you support NSE and do you support volume level encryption keys?
Yep, and the answer is yes, actually. And it is actually included with the service as part of the, again, I get to keep saying, hey, it's included, it's in there, right? So any type of encryption that you need can be included in your subscription. We can actually provide self-encrypted hard drives as well in the event that something, a requirement comes up that asks for that. and that can be included in the service as well. Now, it's not included as standard, right? So if we need it, we have to ask for it, but we do provide that free of charge if someone needs it. So, and that's because different people have different requirements, different ISO 9000 and different types of things of that nature. So we try to make it as flexible as possible.
That's awesome, and I think the key there is you can get self-encrypted disk by asking for it at no additional cost. And the other question that might come up is, hey, we never want to give our disk back at the end of the service, or even if one fails, et cetera. And so non-return disk is an option. There is a small percentage increase for the NetApp will never get the disk back. So, that's an option as well. There was another question that said, what cloud option is the safest point from hackers or intrusion tactics? What I would say is I think they're all safe. We don't read news that Google or Amazon was attacked or hacked. What we read is a customer had information on there and needs to protect it against things like ransomware, just like any other thing. And the cloud didn't fix the need to have a backup copy and a DR copy because you, the application provider, may have left something open that somebody could get through. So one of our clients actually had that. They were in the news, a couple of them. They were in the news. It was a bad experience, and it's a matter of making sure that you have, an air gap for your data and things like that. But, some of that is part of the security profile. You've got it inside whatever cloud, whether it's a Keystone Equinix cloud, a Google cloud, an AWS cloud, an Azure cloud. If you leave a window open to the outside world that's vulnerable to hackers, they can get in just like they could get into somebody's data center that was exposed and create something. So we work with clients all the time on this. Chris, we get this question all the time. We invite you to comparison shop with other people, but everybody wants to know, as a service, is it cheaper than CapEx? Now, what I say it depends.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it actually does depend. In some cases, it actually is cheaper than CapEx, right? So if you're looking at a subscription that maybe is 1, 2, or 3 years long, Keystone will actually be less expensive than a CapEx purchase. However, if you're looking at for something that is going to be something you have to amortize over 5 or 4 or 5 years, then sometimes it can be more expensive, right? When you look at bottom lining the numbers. So you have to make the right business decision for your company, right? Do you want to affect company valuation? Where does our budget come from? What is the cost of money? Those kind of decisions need to be made. And once they are, then it is very easy to decide what is the correct business model. But the key is that, however you want to actually consume the service, whether it's with CapEx or OpEx, it can be the same hardware configuration, right? We can give it to you, and you can do what needs to be done. But then that's when it comes to the what's included, right? So if you need self-encrypting hard drives, those are included in Keystone. But if you actually wanted to purchase them from a CapEx perspective, those would be more expensive, right? So those are the kind of things that come into play when we look at the configurations and the cost.
It's very common for us to say, here's how much it is to buy. Actually, another thing is, here's how much it is to renew support on what you have. And here's what Keystone is. I think the one rule of thumb is if I need exactly 200 and I need it for 5 years, then it's probably cheaper to buy, but that's true of the house. It never needs a modification, et cetera. But in 75% of the cases, when you say, are you going to grow? Are you going to shrink? Do you have any variability? Would you like flexibility to start here? Because if you start at 200, you're going to end up at 800. If you buy 800, it's not a good deal. So, again, we will work with every client and help them understand what best fits their model, and we certainly want the best for them. And I think that's one of the awesome things about Keystone. It's helping the clients, align a service to a business model. So, Chris, I know we're doing our third example for a client that has 12 data centers and started standardizing this. And, first of all, they loved working with you, as you know. But the CIO got on the phone and he said two things. One, this absolutely fits my business model. I've been trying to figure this out. Will you figure it out for compute for me? And two, I'm done life cycling hardware. And I think he's got a lot of his competitors' hardware there as well, and plans on using this as a solution. So, I know we're rolling out, the third for them already?
Third and fourth one. Yep.
Yeah. So
third and fourth location going in right now. The key
and
is,
you know those.
The key is, and you keep hearing Kent say, "Oh, we've done 2 for this customer, 3 for this customer, 4 for this customer." What we're discovering is that with customers with locations all over the place, once they try it and they start using Keystone for the first location, they just go, "Yep, this works really well, works right into my model. Let's do this location and this location and this location." And it fits directly into their business plan.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe as we start to wrap up, one of the last things. Last year, people were like, "What is this? I'm going to try it." Okay, that worked. It's become a standard at the financial company. It's become a standard at the service provider company. But we have not had one client say, "I'm not going to renew after my first year," or "I'm not going to expand." It's 100% of people that want to keep going. Let's see here. What type of data mining is performed? Who is data sold to AWS? No data mining. Matter of fact, that's a great question. Nobody can see the storage but you. If you put it in your data center or you put it in an Equinix data center, it is not sitting in a public cloud. Nobody can get at it. Nobody's mining it. Nobody sees it. Matter of fact, if we're managing it, we're just seeing the metadata, et cetera. So if the perception is that Keystone is a cloud service and that there's some sort of a service agreement where, Google might say, "I'm going to use your data and sell it," et cetera. Think of it like this. If I bought storage and locked it down, I would have paid CapEx for it, but it would be mine and nobody could see it. This is the same thing. You're just paying for it differently. So hopefully that answered that, but we'd be happy to answer any questions. If you do have additional questions, Chris and I did another version of this for Insight. The link is here. The year before, I did it with Samantha Real, who is the product manager for Keystone. If you have questions, I don't know if our emails were up front, but you can send Insight for Keystone at insight.com or Insight for Keystone at netapp.com with a question. I'm Kent at insight.com. And really, as we try to be respectful of your time, when you think about storage and purchase, are you going to refresh, the common thing? If that's a challenge because of uncertainty in the market, uncertainty in business plan, uncertainty with cloud, Keystone might fit really, really well and get you on a brand new technology, many times at lower cost than some support option. It rolls you to the, existing strategy or into the newest technology. Very few people now seeing this option are saying, "Hey, I'm just going to renew support on whatever I had from any vendor." So I don't see any other questions. There's probably more, but again, we're available for follow-up at any time. Chris, any last comments? It's always a pleasure to work with you.
Thank you very much
for being on.
Yep, we appreciate everybody's time. And if you have any questions, get a hold of your Insight account rep or send an email out to one of the emails that Kent mentioned, and we'll be glad to get on a call and help out anybody that needs to.
Beautiful. All right.
Yeah, thanks, Kent and Chris. A lot of good information here. And as they mentioned, please feel free to reach out. And if you have more questions, you can put them in the Q&A box, and we'll get back to you that way as well. So thank you. Just a note that an on-demand version of this webcast will be available within 2 to 3 days. You'll receive an email notification once the recording is available. Thank you again for participating in today's webcast.